Our special meeting for Friday, November 5th, 2010. We're here in John Farrell Council Chambers, room 340 of City Hall, here with Council members Alarcon and Parks, and we do have a quorum. So with that, let's go ahead. We have a one-item agenda. Do we have any general public comment? It's a special meeting anyway, so I think it probably wouldn't apply, but let's go ahead and take up item one.
Good morning.
So, good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
Let's find out the truth about some numbers here today. just to frame this for the public, we are looking at, we've had ongoing status reports about the city's job creation and retention through the expenditure of our grant monies, our reinvestment and recovery dollars, and we are getting, this is a snapshot, to be clear, of those jobs through July 31st, 2010. Obviously, there's actions we've taken since, and we probably will hear about that, but we want to know exactly how many jobs we have created or retained. There were numbers that were put out, I know, in the Controller's report, and the CAO has put out numbers also in the Mayor's office, and we wanted to just dig into as accurate numbers as we can for the public and for ourselves as policymakers. So with that, go ahead and tell us.
And so if I may just sort of back up a little bit, we did release a report back in October 22nd, and it was provide sort of an overall assessment of the city's RR program through July. Obviously, there has been a few updates are trickling in. As you know, staff, our great staff, meets with you every couple of weeks, and they provide a nice packet of information, showing the job numbers, the grant awards, sort of some pending information. But there have been, obviously, a number of questions from various council members as far as the information on job creation. Certainly, with the Controller's audit, there were questions raised regarding the numbers and where they are. There were questions raised on where we relate to other large cities and so forth. And so the report provides some of that information for you. I think what is important, an important message for the public, that while the Controller's audit over the time frame going back to December 2009, much has occurred over the ensuing 9 months or so. While it appears perhaps the city got off to a slow start, the city is making progress with its program and actually spending the dollars and actually getting jobs out there. So if I may, I'll just run through just a quick status of the notes. So I think folks know the formal awards, the roughly $368 million, competitive total award $261. Our total number is $630 million. And then approximately about 19% of the competitive dollars, the grant applications, we were successful. Though it looks like on an ongoing forward basis, there's very little opportunities to get some additional grant awards. Through July, our expenditure dollars are $99 million, with reimbursements roughly about $77 million of that. And here again, I want to sort of reiterate what's important is that the city is spending the dollars, and those numbers are increasing. I think preliminarily, if we go through August, and they're still trying to sort of verify the numbers since we see where we are, but it looks like we're upwards of $145 million from our total awards. Much of that being from the summer jobs and the TANF type dollars, but yet we are showing some progress in overall expenditures. So, as far as jobs, through basically with July, we're really slightly over 2,300 jobs, 2,354. The sort of some cumulative numbers, if you were to look at those, is roughly the 989. And in July, I think our median job number was roughly about slightly over 700. It is important to note that certainly these are basically the direct jobs. We don't track the indirect or induced jobs, nor do we try to estimate too much of those, but only the direct jobs through our grant awards.
Sorry, you said in July it was 700? Did I mishear you? I had here in the summary that we had 2,354 full-time equivalents between private sector and city Did I miss it?
That was during the month of July.
Okay.
So only during the month of July, that's how many people.
So you're saying, so the 700 was what
The
statistically?
700 is the...
On average. Sorry,
Yes,
on average.
Is the median average
Gotcha. For that month, for the period.
from January to July.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you. I do want to note also, we did provide a little bit of information. As you know, our controller is looking at certain of our, various of our programs, but also we have been reviewed by the feds and by the state. 14 of the grant programs have gone some sort of monitoring or review, and at this point, there have been no major findings of violations or any things of that sort that would jeopardize the dollars that we have received. There are a few things that departments are addressing and will get resolved, but there will be at this point, we don't see any potential loss of any of our grant awards. And I want to stress that. This is a very important note for the public.
How does that compare? Are most other cities forfeiting some funds, or very few cities? Do we know any peer comparisons?
I'm not aware of what percentage of funds have been, I guess, forfeited by other cities, but we could look into those numbers.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Clark.
I would say that while not forfeited, because of the construction costs oftentimes coming in a lot less, there's been deobligation of ARA funds back to the feds because of lower costs.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of any situation where there's been fraud or misappropriation or anything like that for any cities.
Yeah, I know there was a report nationally on that, and it was a very low percentage overall considering the numbers. That was the Washington Post had a piece on that, I know, but I was just wondering, it's nice that we don't have it here. If that's not different than the rest of the country, though, it's a different fact than if we happen to be an exception. So anyway, sorry, continue.
Sure. The report also provides just some comparisons to some other cities. We looked at New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Minneapolis. I think one of the points that has come out while, for example, New York has received, as far as dollar value, quite a bit more. Most of their grant awards are due to the education and Medicare, which the city does not have jurisdiction or would be have the opportunity to grab some of those dollars. Through our numbers that we do provide, if you look at sort of, if we go back and try to do more of an apples-to-apples type comparison, we are, through July, lower than New York, we're higher than Philadelphia, we're farther behind in Chicago. But overall, depending on the mix of the grant application, the construction, there are a mix and there are varied degrees of expenditure rate. I think the last thing, major point that I want to provide is, in this report, we provide a number of graphs. And is our intent actually on a go-forward basis to make sure this information is readily available to the public, so the public can see the progress of our spending, where the dollars are spent, and will have a sense of knowing when those will be spent. We certainly anticipate all of the dollars will be spent within the timeline as required by the grant, but I think it would be very important for the public, for you and the public, to be able to see the information in a readily accessible area. And so we'll be looking at the website and make sure we have the information provided. For example, if you look at our graph 2 and our graph 3, we want to make sure that information is clearly presented to the public and to you, so you know that the city is making progress in expending its dollars.
Did I got anything, or should we jump into questions? Anything else? Okay. The comparison with Chicago, the report didn't really have as much detail on this. I know it certainly, once you take out the pieces that are non-comparable, like human services and education, it gets better. And New York is obviously a much more populous place. But is New York and Chicago, I think I remember in committees, it was really in transportation where we were hit the most and where they did the best. Does that account for the discrepancy? It makes it better, I know, but it's still, it's still I can't do the percentage that quickly, but I don't know, 70% more per capita in Chicago, which is not inconsequential. It's probably more like 30 or 40% more in New York City per capita in terms of the apples-to-apples dollars. Do we know category-wise where they have done better than we have?
The information that we get on the other cities, a lot of that comes from this network that we belong to, the Big Cities Network, in which they share information. And some of the cities like New York, who is leading that, are very good about keeping the information up. Our folks have been very good about supplying the information. Some of the other cities have lagged a little bit in providing the information to us, so sometimes it could be a little bit below that. But in comparisons over the time, I mean, Chicago has done better than we have overall, but and that could be for certain political reasons, so I don't know.
But they've also done a better job internally. They've spent out 40% of their funds.
Right, but a lot of the, again, the spending on social service kinds of programs and things that don't require contracting get spent quicker. That's been our experience here, too, is that the funds that we're spending fastest are generally the social service, human service kinds of programs that they do. So if you've got a health department or you're getting the state Medicaid funding being sent down to you, that money gets spent right away. Job training money gets spent right away on some of these jobs, things like that. But on a comparison across the board, say with New York, we found that we were very, very comparable in terms of at least the, again, it varies. Cities like Chicago and New York, they have large public housing authorities, got lots of money that way that, we did fairly well, but we did not anywhere near what they did. Their transit agencies got lots of money, whereas MTA got lots of money here. So, if you look at and take the county, MTA, the school district, what we did and lump that all together, then we're well over $2 billion that was come into this area from ARA.
And did we didn't do a measure of amount of money per, I know this was in the controller's report too, amount of money spent on average per new job, and compare that to the other cities at all? The apples-to-apples comparison of the cities, do we have that statistic?
We don't have that statistic. I think what we had included in attachment G was some per capita numbers regarding spending, but not, for example, how much was spent per job.
That's to me, that's a very important measure. I know Mr. Alicon's spoken about that as well. I don't know, Mr. Park shares the same. But I think it's important to us because it's important for the public. They want to know, okay, what cities are being smartest to put the most people back to work. Now, we know putting people back to work can fit into all sorts of categories. It could be temporary work, and we pat ourselves on the back, but when these funds dry up, there's no career paths. It's not true recovery. There's other jobs that may cost more, so that's not captured in a statistic like that, but it is a long-term job, and it is a long-term economic recovery strategy. I think we've done, considering this is a lot of money that's come in a very quick time, I think Los Angeles has done an admirable job of dealing with the complexity. The departments have done, and I know many of the department reps are here who have done this work, and I personally want to thank them because I think your compliance with what the CAO and the Mayor's Office have asked has been just extremely good, timely, and thorough. We also, though, in the midst of that sort of chaotic environment, are obligated, though, to be as smart as possible about our job strategy. It's clearly the number one thing that's on everybody's mind in America. It certainly is in Los Angeles as well. And that's something that, I think we need to measure and be able to communicate better than we have. Right now, we can talk about these numbers. You can compare them to other cities. We can say, we've done decently applying for the grants. The second step is intelligently spending that on things that will recover the city, help us recover economically. And I still think the jury's out on that, personally. And it's not for lack of any work of anybody at this table or in the audience, but I think it's incumbent upon us as policymakers to be as smart about that as possible. And sometimes within the constraints of whatever categories of funding Washington has decided will help us recover economically. So we're constrained by that as well. We could have our ideal job recovery programs and there may not be funding for them. But we do know certain things work better than others. And I think we've taken some good risks in certain areas there. Obviously, we have a good track record for our youth employment programs, and this helped us really expand them, and I think that's an important part of what we've done the last few years. Our energy efficiency block grants are a place that's still yet to be tested, but those could be a place where, when we saw kind of clean energy and energy efficiency jobs being one of the only places in the midst of the recession where we had job growth in California, this can add to that and help that, but as long as we do it in a way that these skills can be then taken into the private sector and continue to be applied to our workforce. So, those are the things. A lot of people want to latch on to how many jobs we've created. I think that's a very important indicator, and this does seem to be quite different than what was in the Controller's report. So thank you for something that's more, detailed and extensive. I think the Controller's report had some excellent things for all of us that we all know need to change in terms of how we get contracts out and how quickly we get them out. That's something that departments can think about internally. What can you do to make that more efficient? And what do you need us as policymakers to change in terms of some of those regulations that you feel constrained by, so that at times of crisis we can move funds quickly, which is the idea behind and that we're only, that we're, what is this now, a little bit over 2 years after the economic crisis started, we have 16% of these funds spent out. Should be sobering for all of us. And I think there's a combination of blame across the board. Washington getting it out, us not being able to spend it quickly, and so forth. I know a lot of that will spend now, but it certainly could have helped us over the last year more aggressively. And then lastly, I think the measure that we need to come back, and I don't intend to have this ad hoc committee exist forever, but I do think that we have to, at the end, assess what we have done and try to direct those last dollars. We need to be nimble enough to see what's working quickly and be able to move to those models that are working well, whatever funds are left or funds that we have in the city. We are not constrained simply by what the federal government has given us, but our economic development dollars, be they WIA funds, be they CDBG funds, which for the uninitiated that are listening, those are job training and community development dollars. We have to put those in the places that have made sense. If our EEBG funds, EESBG? What is it?
EECBG.
CBG, thank you. Too many. The energy efficiency community block grants, those need to also, I think, lay down a network of something that we can hopefully continue with the Department of Water and Power, with the Community Development Department and others for real good job training moving ahead. So thank you for the extensiveness of this report. I would be interested in some sort of measure that we can develop to keep ourselves accountable. I think quite often we look at these measures and we're worried about outside perception instead of a useful measure for us to say, hey, are we successful or not? And let's have that honest conversation with ourselves. And I think one of those I would suggest to you, but if you can come up with something better or more detailed, I'm certainly open to that, is, what are we spending per capita on job creation? And can we classify an estimation of, whether those are short-term or long-term jobs? And then we can really get a sense of, a short-term job isn't a bad job for somebody out of work, don't get me wrong. But we can certainly look at a more robust economic recovery if we're smart about that. And now the private sector has been steadily adding jobs every month, albeit at a relatively low level. It's the public sector that's lagging, and that's for all sorts of reasons. But we'll see what happens with the new Congress, too. I do not expect many of these programs to move forward, so it's going to be coming upon us to show the ones that really work well and to try to be more precise about that. Mr. Arco?
I think it's important for us to understand the nature of the beast, and the nature of the beast is that while we have a need to pragmatically ascertain the benefits and the results of the program, we also have the perception, which is in the case of money that's coming from the federal government, even more important than the practical results. The Controller's report in some ways highlighted many of the things that I was concerned about when I joined this committee I guess about a year and a half ago. And yet it used terms, it used descriptions that sort of undermine the purpose of the ARA money in the sense that it provided fuel to the cynics in the country that the program contributes to government waste and overspending. Sarah Palin had a field day with the Comptroller's report all over the nation. And so I would disagree with the chair that in fact the jury is in, and the conservative elements, the Tea Party elements, seized that message of Palin running around talking about government overspending and waste, and specifically referring to the Comptroller's report in Los Angeles, and really, I want to make it clear that I don't buy into that approach. The reasons that I raised the questions about focusing on job creation as the primary result, which was not the case before I joined the committee, was because I believe we need more support from the federal government, not less, but because regardless of how we feel about the success of our own program and whether or not we're going to pat ourselves on the back, we cannot pat ourselves on the back related to the public perception of our performance. And so we have a lot more work to do. We have to demonstrate that in fact these programs are efficient, they're effective, and they're providing the promise that was made when this program was developed. So, Mr. Chair, I really believe that our challenge moving forward is to stay on top of the departments, department by department, to ensure that they are doing everything possible to press the edge and the ceiling of success. And I'm not sure we can do that once a month. I mean, believe me, I have a hard time coming here on Friday at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, excuse me. But I really believe we need to have the departments report one at a time what are they doing moving forward to ensure that we are providing the strongest message. To what extent are we modifying our agreements with the federal government to enable us to maximize the job creation elements where we failed to incorporate that priority in the initial grant? What are we doing to ensure that the bureaucracy doesn't get in the way of any contract process or hiring process that we need? And I think we really need to do that with more regularity, and less focus on the general reports, more focus on the specific reports from the department. I actually believe the departments have a lot to tell, and some of them need help, and others are doing very well, and we need to know the difference. So it would be my recommendation. I don't think that. I think what occurred in retrospect is that the general managers didn't focus on job creation as their primary concern. They submitted a lot of grants that had to do with acquiring materials, the computers, upgrading their technological systems, but did not focus on the job creation elements. And then when we created the priority of job creation, most of those grants are already out the door and came back to us, and we have to implement them as such. But it seems to me that the Obama administration might be very open to reconsidering some of those grants and how we implement those grants to ensure maximization of the opportunities to create jobs. So I think we need to help them directly, work with the general managers to press them to make that their priority, to rehash some of the agreements that we have in place, to ensure that moving forward we don't make that same mistake, that we do focus on job creation. But I think we should do it here, give the general managers an opportunity to explain in public how their programs are working and how they're going to adjust to ensure that the kind of criticism that came in the Controller's report, which I believe was far beyond fair in terms of its generalizations, and undermines our long-term goal of continuing to get support from the federal government to create jobs, because the radical right and the Tea Party folks and the conservative elements in the Republican Party latched onto that as a message in these current elections. Our goal is not to maximize democratic, I want to make it clear, not to maximize democratic opportunities in elections, but to create jobs. But we can also demonstrate that, I think, better by meeting more than once a month. So I would ask that the chair consider convening this committee more to the extent that we can work with our general managers in public and drive out whatever opportunities we have moving forward to improve not just our statistical opportunities, but in fact our the public perception that we are doing a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon, and I'm happy to work with the committee to do that. We had 2 months in which we had single-month committee meetings, but there hasn't been a single grant which we haven't had those departments here and repeatedly, so those have been opportunities for the committee to do just that. I would encourage committee members to make sure that they're there at each one of those and to really have those discussions. That we've had a lot of departments who have come here who have waited. Sometimes we ask them questions, sometimes we don't, and I think it's critical for us to do that, so absolutely I don't disagree, but we have met regularly when there's also grants that are before us requiring application and then obviously the formal approval. So we've given the committee opportunities to be able to comment even as those applications are being made, as well as the implementation of them. They've come back. I think most departments have come back 3 or 4 times for each of those grants. So if there's any departments you'd like to start with, we'd be happy to schedule those together. For some of the generalizations you made about which departments have bought equipment and not focused on jobs and things like that. Again, we're constrained by a lot in these, if it's a port, heavy truck machinery program, that's all they can do with it. But in other times, the more discretionary areas, I think there's fair criticisms and there's also a lot of fair compliments to give, which is when it's something like the EECBG grants, we focused, I think, through the departments almost exclusively on job creation instead of, we could have done a lot of other things with those dollars since we have the flexibility to do it. And community block grants usually go for bricks and mortar. This is really for people on the ground. So, Mr. Ozano?
Good morning. As you all know, I've asked for report backs every time we've been here on the number of jobs creation. So what Mr. Alarcon is saying is exactly what I've been asking for every time we've met. And, of course, the most recent thing I asked for was an update of absolutely everything, and you've given it to us. And, of course, it is disturbing for us to see that New York created 2,400, and we ended up, at this point, creating 860. Or, as the report is now saying, that as we're going forward, there's a lot more money in the pipeline. But here's my questions. How much money is now in the pipeline? Because I was very happy with how we aggressively got a lot of money. And I think it's something like, 17% or so has absolutely been through, but the rest is sitting. Explain the process, if you could, of how the monies, A, how much money do we have? B, how much has been spent? C, how many jobs have been right now created? And how many jobs do we see in the pipeline due to the money that we have? Those are the 4 basic questions. We've been awarded $630 million. And I want to make a distinction because it's something that was in the Controller's report that was problematic because it talked about money being received, and it's not money that's received, it's money that's been awarded, right. And it's on a reimbursement basis. As you incur the expenses, then you're able to get reimbursed for it. Sure. So $630 million, we've expended $99 million of that, so you do the math and you have $531 million left to be awarded over the period of time, which is generally until September 30th of 2012. Yeah, and during this period, which is a 2-3 year period, that allocated money will be spent in combination of projects and job creation.
Correct. And what's happened, we've seen a normal sort of a trend going that's been pretty consistent about spending going back to the beginning of this year.
Right.
However, if you look at individual projects, we may have an equipment project or where we go out and you purchase the equipment. You spend all the money is when you purchase the equipment.
Sure.
So it goes along like this without any spending, and then all of a sudden it jumps.
Right.
We have a number of the construction projects that have gone out to contract now. So there's been no spending for quite a while, and suddenly now when we start bidding out these contracts and have them on board, you're going to see a spike in the spending there. Other programs are fairly consistent. The spending occurs each month and goes on, and there's a course to do that. But over time, we are in fact spending this money. When it comes to, with respect to the jobs, as the CAO has reported, we basically have an average of about 700 to 720 jobs a month that are, and the federal government doesn't distinguish between created or retained
Right.
or temporary or
Sure.
long-term or whatever. So any money that's paid to someone that uses our dollars, the number of hours you calculate divided by what your normal working a day is, and you come up with full-time equivalents, and that's what we report.
Right.
We've had spikes during the summer,
Sure,
obviously.
Jim, let me ask you this. Of the $530 million left within that process that has been awarded to us between now and 2012, and the end of 2012, how many new jobs do you figure, or retaining existing jobs, will end up coming out of that money?
That is something that I want to get back to you in a subsequent one on.
Because what would be-
I can say this, though, again, we have been consistent, and again, that this is the way that's reported. It's reported actually to the federal on a quarterly basis, how many jobs, but we have these monthly health reports that the CAO is doing, so it's about 700 jobs a month with spikes for summer youth jobs.
Right.
So you could, in fact, again, it depends. Certain projects come online, contracts get bid, suddenly you've got a lot of people working.
Right.
And other projects go down and whatever. So without looking into these in more detail, which we will, I would say that we will continue to be at the level of 700 jobs a month for the remainder of the period of time that we're here. Are they the same jobs? Are they different jobs? One job ends, a new job begins.
So July was a rare spike, and it came back down for the next
The
3
summer
months?
months, we see a spike due
Yeah.
to the summer youth
the summer
jobs.
youth.
The TANF really bumped up our
No,
numbers.
because what I want to make clear about is, I'm not going to demagogue on this. This last election we went through was a disgrace to the political process, to be candid with you. Government's job is to work with the private sector in stimulating jobs. It's not government's responsibility to create the economy. It's the private sector. And we all know how the private sector has worked historically in outsourcing middle-class jobs to third-world countries for their profit at the expense of the American workers. And I also believe government has a social contract that it must live up to its people, and that's Social Security, that's Medicare, and other aspects, health care in general, and infrastructure, education. So I think government's role is critical going forward. It isn't cutting back on government. It's the private sector showing more intelligent, responsible commitments to job creations in America. So I'm not going to panic by what I'm seeing by the disgusting process we just went through. So here, we as a city need to not panic over this and not demagogue over this. We have $530 million left of the existing money that we've been awarded, which I'm thrilled that we have that much. And what we need to do is quietly and comfortably point out how that money will be spent over the next 24 months, 36 months, and the kinds of opportunities it creates. First, you need capital dollars for capital issues regarding things, and obviously jobs, but not to find ourselves in some kind of a threatened, crazy kind of responsive, defensive way when we're working the way we are. And I just want to make it very clear, I've been coming to these meetings every other week when we've been holding them, and you guys have been doing a great job in laying it out. At the same time, we have to be honest. We have been cutting back on staff. We've been furloughing people. We've been laying off people, and so the city itself is going through a tremendous reorganization and refocusing. So all of this plays into the same time. But I'm very happy to know that we do have $530 million more to work through the process. I don't want any insanity in Washington to pull our money away and play some crazy game to satisfy some psycho insanity out there. So please keep us posted every other week with the jobs that are being created, the infrastructure that's being created with it, and let's keep moving in that direction. Thank you.
And I would add, too, that, and the CEO is correct, too, in terms of our estimation. We believe that all of the money that we're going to be awarded will be spent within the time frames that are allocated. But we want to do more than that. We want to expedite to the extent that we can not only the expenditure and reimbursement of monies, but also of job creation, too. So we do want to look at going forward how quickly that we're implementing our programs, putting people to work, and getting reimbursed for it.
Right on. Thank you.
Mr. Parks, I just want to comment that I'm glad to see that we have a standardized definition, because I think the first several months we've been trying to figure out what was a position, what wasn't a position. I just hope they stay with it so that we don't have to revamp down the line. The only question I had, and if you could remind me on the force account, is that dealing with street services where we hired internal
Yes,
people?
that is dealing with street services and some of the positions in Department of Transportation.
Okay. But so we've resolved, because I thought at one time they were
Yes.
critical that we hired internally and they thought we should have hired externally.
It has to do with the competitive process. The way FHWA has it is that the use of force account is only a best alternative method if you show that it is cost effective to the program. But street services as well as transportation have showed that it is cost effective for us to use our own city forces. So I believe for street services there was only one project, and I believe it's only $300,000 that we had to go through contract.
Okay, so we resolved all that, so
Yes,
if
it has
there's
been.
other money in the future, we can continue doing what we've been doing.
If there were other money in the future, because I think going forward, FHWA would require that we go out competitively.
Okay, so
but they
they
grandfathered in because we'd started these projects with force account, that they said, okay, if you've gone ahead and started the project and expended money, which we made sure that we had, they let us continue using force account. But
The future would be different then.
the future was, their feeling was, and to some extent it made that we should lay off people so that we can then go contract out for the work to be done, which didn't seem to make much sense. But we didn't have to deal with that issue because of the ruling that they made to allow us to grandfather those people in.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay. If not, thank you for the report. One last note on that. I assume when I hope you're lowballing that it's 700 ongoing, especially if we had only 16% expended by the summertime. If you kept that math and it was only really 700 that sustained, then we will be at $1 million a job, and I think we can do better than that, and I hope we can do better than that. I know some of them will come and some of them will go, so it's counting that. But I don't know if you want to speak to that, but...
Yes, we are expecting a lot more of the jobs coming in, especially when Weather Station and NSP2 moves into their implementation phase.
Okay.
I think the one piece that I'd like to add, and I think we've had a good discussion, is certainly on a go-forward basis, we want to make sure that information is provided to you and the public. And it's our desire to actually start working with the departments and really on a go-forward basis help them develop what I'll call an expenditure plan so we can see how they plan to spend the dollars over the coming months. And then along with that, the potential for the job creation or retention. We'll be happy to work with you and the scheduling departments in. Certainly,
if you can think of a couple departments that we've had a good kind of introductory and middle deep level discussion with a lot of departments. I'd like for you, the CEO, to identify a couple departments that we can go deeper in, where we prepare them ahead of time, so it's not just a bunch of questions and they come back, but what is your plan? How many jobs are you trying to get? how much leverage do you have for these dollars? How did you maximize that leverage? Did you compare yourself to other programs you've done or others? That level of discussion, I think, Mr. Alcon, myself, Mr. Parks, and Mr. Rosendahl are interested in, is to be able to go, obviously we've had good presentations, sometimes a lot of that's like, well, we're figuring it out. Now is the time for us to hear in greater detail, not just how it's being figured out, but where we can hold ourselves accountable. I think the best thing for departments to do is to think that through and to give themselves goals. Don't set the bar of low expectations just so you can brag about exceeding it. Let's really try to do the work of putting people back to work. And if you can think of a couple of those departments, we'll schedule them first, and we'll just start going through them.
We'll have some conversations. Obviously, I think the DOT and Public Works, given the audit, have come to mind, and certainly we want to put any questions to bed quickly, but
Great.
we'll work with...
And the weatherization stuff will be good, too, at some point. Okay. Yes, Mr. Clay.
On point that Councilman Alarcon made, I'd like to also say that we'll look at, in the mayor's office, we'll explore this issue that he had raised about if the Obama administration is open to changing some of the guidelines on some of these grants that would allow for job creation. I think it's an excellent idea to see.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll have something that we can report back on that as well.
Good. Okay. Thank you. If there's no further questions, this meeting of the ad hoc committee is adjourned. Thank you all. Oh, sorry? No, we'll note and file, excuse me. We'll note and officially file this. But by noting it, we'll take it out from that file frequently and reread it. So, don't worry. Thank you.